I want you to think about this. I want you to think about the last time that you were lost, like physically lost. It doesn't happen very often when we're driving places anymore because now our phone has a map and shows us where to go. At least smartphones do. I don't know what Androids do, but smartphones, just kidding. Smartphones show us where to go. So none of us tend to get lost when we're going somewhere. If you do, with Google Maps or Waze or whatever you use, congratulations, you have reached a whole nother level of lostness. But for the rest of us, we can pretty much get where we want to go now. But we still get lost places, don't we? So think about the last time you were lost. It could have been hiking. You're out hiking. It's easy to get lost doing that. It could have been in a really, really one of those massive hotels or convention centers. It's easy to get turned around there. It could have been in a parking lot or a parking garage. That still happens, doesn't it? You get lost. You can't figure out where your car is. You can't figure out where you are in the middle of that big parking garage. So that happens sometimes. For some of you, you've done this recently. For some of you, you've gotten lost on a cruise ship. You were headed to the comedy show. Somehow you ended up in the buffet, and you never left. It was weird. You just gave up on comedy entirely, didn't you? It's like, well, this looks pretty good. So you just stayed right there. It's easy to get lost on a cruise ship. You can think of the last time that happened to you. Here's why I want you to think about it. You know what's so ironic about when we get lost? It's kind of weird. It's unusual. We never really think of it this way, but it's always true. The reality is you're always lost before you know you're lost. Isn't that true? You're always lost before you know you're lost. In other words, there is a period of time where you actually are lost and don't know where you're going, but you think you still do. And then finally you realize, oh no, I'm not. I'm actually lost. But there's a period there where you think you've got it all figured out and you're actually going in the wrong direction. Now for some of you, it's a short period because really quickly you figure out, and you listen to somebody who says, I don't think this is the way, and you're like, yes. For others of us, we're so confident in our skills that that period may be a long time before we're willing to admit we're lost. But all of us know what it feels like to get lost, but we also realize, wait a minute, I was actually lost way back there. And the reason I bring this up is because that means self-assurance is no insurance against being lost. Or to think of it another way, your self-assurance, your confidence, I know where I am, I know where I'm going, I know how to get there. That is actually no guarantee that you're not lost and you just don't know that you're lost. And I bring that up because the topic we're going to talk about today is one that you don't think you're lost in. As a matter of fact, you think you pretty well got it figured out. You're very confident in the plan you have for what we're going to talk about today. But it is possible. Matter of fact, it might be likely that you and I are actually lost in this area of our lives. We just don't know that we're lost. So today, we're in week 3 of our series, Love Money and the American Way. And if you're just joining us, I'll catch you up real quick. The question that we've been asking throughout this series is, if you could change one thing in your life to make you happier, what would you change? One thing, and you thought, oh my gosh, if I could just change that one thing, I'd be so much happier. Life would be so much better. If you had a magic button, you could just hit one thing and change it, what would it be? Whatever your answer is to that question is what they call in systems thinking a leverage point. A leverage point is just one point in the system where if you improve it, it improves a lot of things. If you change it, it changes a lot of things. Well, that's what you believe the answer to your question is. You feel like, and I do too, if I could just change that, it would change so much and I'd be so much happier in life. And my guess is that your answer falls into one of these two categories. Either it falls into the category of love, and this is all relationships, but you can't put the word relationships in that circle very easy, so we condensed it. It's either love, it's either if this relationship would change at work, at home, with my kids, whatever it is. If I could change that, everything would change. Or if I had this relationship, or a relationship you don't have right now, you wish you did. So your answer may fall into that category, or it may fall into the category of money. If I could just make more, save more, spend less, get out of debt, invest more, whatever it may be. If I could just change this about my money, I would be happier. This is how most of us as Americans think. We feel like if I can change this area or this area of my life, then everything's going to be good. So over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about what this looks like with relationships. Today, we're going to talk about what it looks like with money. And if you're sitting there going, oh no, Matt, I can't believe you're doing this because I invited a friend today and now you're talking about money. This is going to wreck the whole thing. I'll just calm everybody down. This is not about giving. There's no ask at the end, okay? So it's all good. This is not about giving. This is actually today about meaning. About meaning. Because if there's one thing that we as human beings want more than happiness, it's meaning. We want to get up every day and feel like what we're doing matters, that we're making a difference, that we're not just going through the motions, that it doesn't matter, that life's not just luck. When we're going through suffering or struggles or difficulties or challenges, we want to feel like there's meaning and purpose in them, that there's something good that's going to come out of them. As human beings, we crave meaning. And we crave it because it was hardwired into us by our Creator to live a meaningful life. And it is why Jesus, when he was on this earth, talked about love and money, relationships and money a lot. Talked about them all the time. If you don't believe me, just pick one of the accounts of his life, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, and just read through and pay attention to how often he's talking about relationships or money. But here's the thing that was different. For Jesus, he would teach over and over again, the leverage point to a more meaningful, happier life is not just changing a relationship. It's not just improving your financial situation. He said there's actually a deeper leverage point that you need to address that will impact both of these areas. That's why he talks so much about this idea of trust. Because Jesus knew the object of your trust will determine the outcome of your life. In other words, whoever or whatever you trust the most shapes who you are and where you end up in life. It shapes and influences all the decisions you make. It shapes and influences the direction of your life and where you eventually land in terms of a destination in life. So Jesus would talk often about, hey, you want to get to the root of what's going on here in this relationship or with your financial world. It's actually not just change this, get them to change, get them to do that differently, make a little more. He's going, no. You have to change what you trust. And this was certainly true for the relationship between our trust and our money. I do not have to convince you of this because you're just like me. The American way when it comes to this relationship between money and trust is to trust ourselves and our plan. This is why I said you don't feel like you're lost. You don't feel like anything's off financially. And the reason I know that is because you are following your plan right now. And think about this. Whether you've got a lot, you got a little, whether you feel anxiety around money, financial pressure, whether you feel like, I got to change some things, I got to catch up, I got to be better, whether you feel like, oh my gosh, I got to protect this, I'm so anxious, I'm going to lose it. No matter where you fall on this, you have full trust and confidence in your plan to manage your financial world. I am confident of that because you haven't changed your plan. You could be under tons of financial stress, but you haven't changed your plan, which means you believe your plan is right. There's all kinds of information out there of other plans and perspectives. But you're following yours and I'm following mine because we trust we know best when it comes to our money and our possessions. The problem is, if you're like most people, your plan, my plan, tends to revolve around us. And this creates some issues for us. And you say, no, it doesn't. Here's what I mean by that. This isn't a criticism, but we all tend to be self-centered when it comes to broad perspective, how we view our money and our possessions. And the easiest way to illustrate this is for you just to think about the questions that run through your head or the concerns that run through your head whenever you're thinking about money and possessions. Everything revolves around you, doesn't it? Everything revolves around me. If you don't believe me, just pay attention this week to every time you think about money, what you're thinking about or asking. And it's all about, am I good? Do I have enough? Do I need to make more? Man, look at what a great job I did. Whatever it is, it's entirely self-centered. And here's the challenge with that. If I center my entire financial world around me, I have just made myself an end in and of myself, which means by definition, I have just robbed myself of the ability to experience the meaning that I actually want the most. Because you cannot experience meaning without being a means to a greater end, a means to a bigger end, a means to something bigger than and beyond yourself. So if everything in my financial world is let me take care of me, I got to worry about me, then I just made myself the be-all, end-all. And all I've got to show for this is me, which means I can never experience any meaning because I'm not willing to leverage me for a means or an end greater than me. This is why Jesus talked about shifting our trust. This is why he talked about, why don't you let me be the guide for every area of your life? Instead of following your plan, why don't you follow mine? And if you're skeptical as to why Jesus would do that, I want to remind you of two things. First, I want to remind you, Jesus does not need your money, okay? That's not why he talks about this. It's not what it's about at all. Jesus talked about money more than heaven, hell, and prayer all put together because he knew what an impact it was having on us. But he didn't need it. He wasn't trying to grab it. He's the king of everything. I mean, by very virtue of the fact he's God, you don't want to follow a God who needs something from you. He didn't need it. I would also remind you, he's not trying to get it. Because as I have to remind people sometimes, if he wanted your money, he could take it. If he couldn't take it, he's not powerful enough to be God. So if he wanted it, he could actually take it, but he doesn't want it. He doesn't need it and he doesn't want it. That's not the point. What Jesus wants for us is to be able to have a 30,000 foot view perspective. This isn't about giving or, it's not what we're talking about. He wants us to view and think about all of our money and our possessions, everything in our financial world from his point of view, because his point of view is what allows us to leverage everything in our possessions to find meaning and to find the happiness that does not come or go with what's going well or what's not going well in the moment. In his most famous sermon, Sermon on the Mount, some of you may have heard of it, his most famous sermon, Matthew 6, Matthew is one of Jesus' followers, records for us that Jesus took the entire middle section of this sermon, like a third of the sermon, and he talked about a new, different, countercultural perspective that he was inviting us to have towards all that we possess. And here's part, I won't read it all, but here's part of what he had to say. He said, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This is why meaning and money are so connected, by the way. Because according to Jesus, your money and your heart are connected. So wherever your money goes, your heart follows. Now, when Jesus is teaching this, he's not saying this is good or bad. He's just saying this is a life principle. It's just the way humans work. Wherever your money goes, your heart follows. Now, even if you're not a follower of Jesus, you can actually leverage this for your benefit. Because all you have to do is think about, well, what do I wish I cared about more? What do I wish I was more passionate about? Where do I feel like if I could just put more of my life there, I would find more meaning in life? If you know the answer to that question, then you can leverage this principle to your benefit. Because all you have to do is start putting your money there. And it will naturally drag your heart there, which means you'll care more about it. Wherever you put your money, you start paying more attention to it, don't you? Your money brings your attention right along. It brings your passion right along. And it's a bit of a cyclical loop that reinforces itself. Because once your money's there, it drags your heart there. And then once your heart's there, you want to put more money into it. Whatever you care about. Isn't this true? Whatever you care about, you tend to put your money into. So it just kind of feeds on itself. And Jesus is going, you have to understand this is just a principle. It's not right or wrong. Birds fly, babies cry, and where your money goes, your heart follows. It's just the way it works, okay? But while you can leverage that for your benefit, there is a bit of a byproduct of this principle that for those of us who claim to follow Jesus, well, it's a little sobering. It's a bit of a line in the sand because what this means for us is that you can't follow Jesus fully and be lost financially. In other words, to put it in simple terms, I can't say, oh, I'm following Jesus fully and I love him, when my money is over here dragging my heart this way and Jesus is over here going this way. It just doesn't work. You can't live with that tension. You can't navigate those two any more than, and this is maybe a better way to understand it, any more than imagine I'm talking to you and I'm like, hey, I love Jesus and I'll follow him fully, except I just don't like any of that forgiveness stuff he taught. I am not forgiving them. I'm not interested in practicing forgiveness. I ignore all of that, but I sure do love Jesus. Or, I love everything about Jesus except that love one another stuff. And I'm just ignoring that, and we're pushing that to the side because I hate that guy, but I still love Jesus. I mean, you would look at me like I was an idiot. You go, no, I don't, even if you're not a Christian, you'd be like, I don't think it can work that way, Because you got to go hand in hand. Well, it's obvious in those realms. But a lot of us who are followers of Jesus, when it comes to our money and possessions, we do try to separate the two. We do try to. And it's because of the perspective we have on how money and possessions work. But our perspective just might be blinding us to the impact our money and possessions are having on our life and our sense of meaning. Jesus dives into this. Here's what he says next. He says, the eye is the lamp of the body. Now, he's using a metaphor, and this sounds a bit like a riddle, but let me explain it. He uses the eye to refer to our attention and our desires. So all Jesus is saying is, when you see, the way you see the world, the things you care about, the things you desire, the things you pay attention to, the way you see the world impacts your entire life. What you care about and give your attention to moves your entire life in that direction. You know this. Whatever you look at, you tend to move towards. Whatever has your attention gets your direction as well. So Jesus says you have to understand when you think about your perspective that what you're paying attention to and the way you see things really matters. And then he gives us two examples. He says, if your eyes are healthy, now, this was written in Greek, which we're not going to get into because I'm not going to bore you with all this, but if you don't believe me, you can Google this and find out for yourself. The Greek word that's translated healthy here is not referring to physical health. Jesus is actually talking about generosity. He, in essence, is saying, if your eyes are generous, which is his way of saying, if your perspective on the world is generous. What's it mean to have a generous perspective on the world? Here's what it looks like. You can read the rest of Matthew 6, and he unpacks this. To have a generous perspective means I live my life with open hands. That I don't believe everything I possess is my own. I don't believe I'm the owner of it and I get to do whatever I want to with it. A generous perspective doesn't believe, oh, there's scarce resources, so I got to grab all I can for me, and I'll try to help you afterwards, but we're a little bit in competition for the same thing, so I'm going to grab and accumulate as much as I can, hold on to it. No, a generous perspective is, it's not mine. I'm going to live with open hands. This is a gift from God. It's all his. He can give me more if he wants to. He can give me more when I need it. There's plenty, there's an abundance of things. I do not have to worry about it. I'm going to live my life with open hands and I'm going to be generous. I am not going to live in my financial world where I'm prioritizing me first because now I'm an end and not a means to an end. I'm going to prioritize other people first. I'm going to think about others. Again, not just giving, it's like the entire spectrum of how we view things. Jesus says, if you have that kind of perspective, then he says your whole body will be full of light, which is his way of saying your life will actually move in the direction where it gives you all the things that you want most. When you live like this, now you can be a means to an end and you will experience meaning and purpose and significance and peace. Now you're going to experience contentment. Your whole body will be full of light. When I live like this, I have no problem making a difference in somebody else's life. This is the irony of it, isn't it? We all want to contribute to something bigger than ourselves. You have those desires in you. You see needs or you see problems and you're like, oh, I would love to be able to put my resources into that. You want to. The problem is you can only do that if you are confident. Oh my goodness, if I put it into that, God will give me more when I need it. That's the only way you can do it. If you don't have this perspective, you lose that ability. Jesus addresses this. He goes on. He says, here's your other option. But if your eyes are unhealthy, you can guess what that means. Greedy. Then your whole body will be full of darkness. In other words, if you live your life like this, and this is not a criticism, this is just natural for all of us, isn't it? To have a perspective on life that is unhealthy is to have a perspective of scarcity. It's up to me because there's only so many resources and I got to make sure I have enough for me. And then I got to protect what I have and I got to make sure I don't lose it and I got to make sure that I don't run out. And I need to make more so that I can. All of this comes with it. Here's the problem when you live like this. The reason Jesus said your whole body will be full of darkness is because you cannot live this way and not have anxiety. You cannot live this way and not be anxious about, do I have enough? Will I have enough? Will I lose what I have? You can't hold your fist like this and not be tense. It's impossible. So when you and I, and this is just natural, but when you and I center everything on ourselves first, Well, now I live with a constant anxiety. I need to protect. I need to accumulate. I never cross a line where I feel like, oh, that's enough. I'm good now. I'll open my hands up. It never happens. There's always a fear that you might need a little bit more. There's always a concern that I might not have done enough for myself. And the pressure is on me. And when you live this way with this perspective, you feel the pressure to take care of you no matter what. So what does this rob you of? Think about it. Those needs, those issues in the world that you care about, those opportunities you have to contribute to something more meaningful than just you. And you're like, I wish I could, I wish I could. People like this are always like, I wish I could, I just can't yet. And you falsely believe that one day the yet's gonna come. But it never does. It never does, because the anxiety never goes away here, because you always feel it's on you to take care of you. And if you don't, nobody will. And Jesus' point is, if you just live with a perspective like this, you don't have to worry about taking care of you. You don't have to worry about, will I ever have enough? Because if you do what your Heavenly Father asks you to do with everything He's giving you, He will always make sure you have whatever you need. But this never gives you the ability to leverage your money and possessions for meaning in any significant way. And let me tell you why this is most dangerous. I'll actually let Jesus tell you why this is most dangerous. He says this, if then the light within you is darkness, how great's that darkness? Here's all He meant. If you're living like this, but you believe this is the right plan, if you're living like this and you're lost, but you don't know you're lost, you will never change. Which means you will live your whole life chasing something you can never get. You'll live your whole life chasing a meaning you will never experience, because you can't experience meaning when you're an end in and of yourself. You have to be willing to be a means to a greater end beyond you. So after this bit of a metaphor riddle that Jesus gives, He's got everybody scratching their head about the perspective of how they view everything they have. Is it God's? Is it mine? Is it my responsibility, His? Am I an owner? Am I a manager? Jesus says, let me tell you why I'm talking to you about this. And it's not, He didn't finish this and was like, now we're going to receive an offering. Let's pass the buckets. You know, that was not His point. Here's why He said it. He said, no one can serve two masters. Now, we never think of it this way, but you know what this means? You serve money. Whenever I live like this, I serve what I have, because I invest all my time in trying to protect it, keep it, get more of it, save more of it, keep more of it. Jesus says you can't serve two masters. If you're like this is going to drag your heart right along with you to a self-centered end. He goes on. He says, either you're going to hate the one, you're going to love the other. You're going to be devoted to the one, you're going to despise the other. And then he gets really clear. You cannot serve both God and money. Because again, if this is an area of my life as a follower of Jesus that I believe it's up to me, I got to make sure I take care of me, I can't trust Jesus' plan because it's too risky. If that's the way you want to approach this area of your life, then you end up moving your heart in a direction that's the exact opposite of where Jesus is inviting you, where He's inviting me to follow. But it's hard, isn't it? It's hard. Because to live this way means I have to trust. I have to trust that what Jesus is saying is best for me, and I'm having to leave the outcome in His hands. At least this way, I feel like I'm controlling an outcome, whether I really am or not. This way, though, this way creates anxiety, discontent, a constant feeling that I need to have more, or I need to protect more, or I need to consume more. And the whole reason Jesus taught this is he's going, that is actually not the life you're saying you want the most. If you just do this, you become free from all the anxiety because now you're acknowledging this isn't all on my shoulders. I just get to manage what God puts in my possession. He owns it, I manage it. So I'll do whatever he wants me to do with it. And when you live this way, the anxiety disappears because if you don't have enough, it's his job to provide it. This way you get to live content. Doesn't mean you don't get more, but you're just content. You don't feel this internal drive, I've got to have more or I won't end up okay. This way, you live with confidence that God's going to take care of you because I've been doing what I think Jesus wants me to do with everything he's given me, so if something goes wrong, it's up to him to provide. He promised he would. And this way gives you the freedom to contribute to something more meaningful than just you. So, I know all of us have a plan. And as I said, the goal of this is not anything about giving. The goal of this is I just hope you'll step back and look at the broad perspective you have on everything you own and what it's creating in you and where it's taking you. And if it's not creating in you and taking you to the places and doing the things that you want it to do, that you most want, you may need to change. Now, for those of us who are followers of Jesus, to take it one step further, I would ask you, you got a plan just like I do. But do you feel confident that you have consulted your Savior and your leader? And that you've created a plan based on what he wants you to do. You view things the way he's invited you to view things. Could you confidently say, yeah, I think that's true as best I know? Or have you done what's so common for all of us, myself included, which is just, no, I'm gonna come up with my plan. I've got to figure this out. So here's what I want to invite you to do. I wrestled with what's the takeaway from this? And here's where I landed. And even if you're not a follower of Jesus, I think you can do this because I think it'll work for you. I think you might find some great insights from it. Here's all I want to ask you to do. For the next 7 days, okay, just this week, for the next 7 days, would you imagine what it would be like if you had Jesus' perspective on all you had instead of your own? Okay? Just imagine, I'm not saying change everything. I'm just saying for the next 7 days, whenever you find yourself thinking about money, making decisions about money, talking about money, which is most of the time, isn't it? I mean, our world revolves around it. So whenever you find you start, your perspective on money and possession starts to creep into what you're saying, would you just pause and go, how would I handle this differently? How would I think about this differently? How would I act differently if I actually adopted Jesus' perspective instead of mine in this moment? I'm not saying you have to do anything different, but I hope you'll spend the next 7 days pausing to reflect on how you would be different if you were confident this was the better perspective. And the reason I'm asking you to do that is because you might just find yourself realizing that you would be free from some things that continue to haunt you and follow you and consume you. And you might be free to do some things that you actually care about deeply. You might be free to experience some things that you desire strongly. You might discover, oh my goodness, if I felt like this, well, this is exactly what I would do in this situation, and that would feel so much more meaningful. That would feel so much more significant. And then maybe you actually take the step and do it. Maybe you don't. But you at least need to imagine what it would be like to see everything you own in your financial world from God's point of view and not your own. Because again, Jesus' point is not to try to get anything from you. His point is he doesn't want what you have to consume you. And when you and I feel the weight on our shoulders of it is up to me, it's up to me, it's up to me, it's up to me to get, it's up to me to protect, it's up to me to build, it's up to me to save, it's up to me to keep up. When we feel that, it consumes us. This is the only way that will free us. And for those of us who are followers of Jesus, as uncomfortable and unsettling as this is, we can't fully follow Jesus this way. We can only fully follow if we actually trust him with this area of our lives. Because wherever we put our money, it drags our heart along. So, is it possible that you and I could be lost when it comes to this? When it comes to our perspective on our possessions? Could it be possible we're lost, we don't even know it? And could it be possible that shifting our trust from our plan to Jesus' plan, from our perspective to his, just might give us the things that we actually want most in life? Let me pray for us. Father, this is so hard for us to see. It's even harder for us to do because it requires us to let go of control, to trust an outcome to you that we feel like, rightly or wrongly, we have some control over. So would you help us this week just to be aware whenever these natural, self-centered perspectives come creeping in to the way we think, to the decisions we make, to the conversations we have. Would you help us to have enough wisdom in those moments just to pause and to imagine what it would be like if we had adopted your perspective in that moment instead of our own? Would you help us to get a glimpse of the freedom and the meaning and the happiness that we might experience if we weren't so tied up in our possessions? And it's in your name we pray.